I'm Alison Eyring, organization psychologist, CEO, and endurance athlete. I've spent the last 25 years helping companies solve the people and organizational challenges of growth. I've worked with all types of CEOs and business leaders across the world, but it takes a special kind of leader to successfully grow a business. I call them growth leaders. These leaders have an edge for growth. This allows them to drive performance today while transforming their business for tomorrow while keeping their people energized. So whether you're starting a company or reigniting a team within a large, mature company, I'll show you what it takes to successfully drive business growth through conversations with some of the best growth leaders I know. In this episode, I speak to Rosaline Chow Koo, founder and CEO of CXA Group, a company that's made its mark on Asia's health industry in just a few years. CXA is Asia's first AI-driven health platform. Rosaline talks to me about how she grew the company to disrupt the healthcare industry and how innovating with customers has been key to driving business growth. So welcome, Rosaline, and thanks for being here with me on Growth Leaders.
Sure. Pleasure to be here.
Rosaline, I'm going to start my conversation with you today by asking you some questions just to help us get an appreciation of who you are and where you've come from. I'm going to ask you to give me as short an answer as possible so that we can understand who you are.
Okay.
Let me start by asking you, you grew up in L.A.
I did.
Describe your childhood.
I grew up in Watts during the riots.
Wow. And where did that leave you with?
Less fear.
After you went to school, so you went and you studied cybernetics, is that right?
I did. It's human factors engineering.
And what made you want to study that?
Actually, was good at math, but I was super interested in psychology. So this was man-machine engineering. So it's interaction between people and machines.
Now, you studied cybernetics, but then your first job was working a factory line in a toothpaste factory in Iowa. And so what took you to Iowa?
I wanted to lead, and they offered me an opportunity to be a leader at 21.
So this was with Procter & Gamble at the time.
It was. I worked on Crest toothpaste.
And you had a great experience driving change in that factory. What was the big learning that you had?
That the only way you can change people is if you get complete buy-in and involve them in the change.
Which must have been a bit challenging if you were only in your 20s.
Yes, and they were in their 40s and 50s, so I had to earn their respect since I was the first Asian they've ever seen up close.
Now, how many years after that then did you go to graduate school? So you went to Columbia.
I did.
How long went by?
2 years. I stayed at Procter & Gamble for 2 years.
And what did you study at Columbia?
I actually studied marketing and finance.
And why?
My learning from P&G was that I needed to learn more about business. So finance and also marketing gave me that. I also took a lot of nonprofit marketing.
So Columbia's in New York.
Yes.
What drove your decision to go there?
They actually gave me a full ride. So they paid for my whole tuition and my room and board. So I actually got a fellowship to attend.
That's pretty awesome. And when you graduated, what did you do next?
I worked for a bank for the next 8 years in Manhattan.
What was the time frame that you did that?
I worked there starting as a summer intern, so 86 to about 96.
Now, around that time, you moved to Singapore, didn't you?
I moved after that to Singapore.
So tell me, what was it that brought you to Singapore?
We were actually supposed to move to London. My husband had a post there, and so I got a job in London with the same bank. But the day the movers came, his company told him, no, not London, Singapore. So that's how we got here. It was unexpected.
How long did you stay in banks?
I stayed in banking for 8 years in 8 different roles.
Wow, 8 different roles.
Yes.
What was your big takeaway or insight from those roles?
I was either fixing something or building something new. And what I learned was to implement radical change. You actually have to have a vision of where you want to go and then the strategy with quick wins all along the way. And I did 8 of those projects.
So I guess learning how to live without fear was helpful.
It was because I became the go-to person for those 8 years.
Now, in what year did you move to Asia?
I moved in 1996.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about that. What drove you here?
It was unexpected, but my husband was supposed to be part of the London office of his firm. Instead, they asked them to open Asia and be the Asia Pac leader. So he was the first employee.
And when you came here, you had how many children?
I had one, a 1-year-old, but I decided since I didn't know anyone and didn't have a job since I didn't expect to be here to have another child.
And so then what did you do?
I gave birth.
Living without fear was quite helpful at that point.
So I actually spent 3.5 years at home, and I was the best friend of the zoo. I mean, there's friends of the zoo. I went 3 times every week with my kids and everyone else's kids.
I empathize. That was one of our favorite destinations when my children were small as well.
Exactly.
Now, you, after a few years, I think it was about 3.5 years, you went back to work. What did you do first?
I had to launch a startup.
Why you say I had to? What drove you to do that?
I actually invested money in a startup, and then I decided I should launch it, so I did.
Now, this was the payroll outsourcer, is that correct?
The first one was unified messaging, text-to-speech, speech-to-text. We were way too early, in 1999, that is. But Bain recruited me to a second startup after I launched that one because there was a lot of news. And that was a payroll outsourcer.
And how long did you stay with that organization?
2 years.
And what was your big takeaway from that experience?
We actually thought that if we built something, everyone would come, but that didn't happen. So we ended up pivoting and listening to our clients. And what they said was, hey, we want to outsource. Could you build a payroll outsourcer? So we became the first regional payroll BPO.
I'm so interested that you went from a very fast-moving world, very innovative, to an insurance company, which is an industry that tends to be, or historically has been quite traditional and not so quick to act.
Yes.
What took you into insurance?
I actually had quit the startup because I found out my daughter had epilepsy and a learning disorder. So I had left the workforce to diagnose my daughter. And after I put her in special needs school, my ex-clients from my startup came and said, hey, you've built an e-business before. Why don't you build ours? And they just happened to be an insurance company.
And how long did you stay in that role?
I stayed for 2 years, but I didn't build their e-business. My boss changed, and so very quickly they said, why don't you run Singapore? And then very shortly after that, why don't you run Southeast Asia? So I did.
Or what led you from that to then starting up the company that you now run, which is CXA Group? Tell me a little bit about what happened that led to that.
When I was at the insurance company, I didn't want to pay the brokers a commission. So I actually took 200 clients from a broker. So the biggest one hired me. I was attacking the brokers. And so I ended up running Mercer and Marsh's 14 countries.
Now, while you were there, you became aware of clients complaining about the value add of brokers.
We did. Even though we grew 800% to about $1 billion, our clients complained that not just the brokers, but the whole insurance industry was not helping them with their pain points.
So did you try to fix that problem within that organization?
I did. I spent 5 years, every year for 5 years, and I was already on the operating committee in New York, trying to convince senior leaders to give me $10 million to fix this.
And they wouldn't give it to you?
No, every year they said no for 5 years.
Wow. Do you think that other leaders in that organization also felt the pain that you were experiencing, not in terms of raising the money, but in terms of hearing the customer complaints?
Oh, yes. No, that was always the complaint, that our healthcare costs are rising every year and it doesn't meet the needs of our employees. And what are you going to do about the worsening health? Also, can't you fix the paper, this paper receipt? So that was incessant for all 8 years. And I'm sure it's been forever.
So it sounds like a little bit of your background helped you see that you could find a solution to this problem.
Exactly. So I built e-businesses before. Plus, all I did in banking and in the 2 startups was build according to our clients' needs. How do we solve these? So it was always about building and resolving issues.
Coming up in the next segment.
You used your entire family savings
Yes.
to fund the business.
I didn't mean to.
You're listening to Growth Leaders, a podcast with Alison Eyring.
When you started CXA Group, you used your entire family savings
Yes.
to fund the business. And
I
then
didn't
you
mean
went,
to.
Say more about that.
I
It
didn't
sounds
mean
so
to.
scary.
It is scary. So I meant to use all my money, and I also signed a personal guarantee. But when I went to the regulator to get approval for the acquisition, they told me you had to be the sole shareholder. And so as the sole shareholder, it's just me and my family. I had to tell my PE firm to back off. So that's when I found my husband's keys because I needed $3 million more. So yes, he had the money. And so by then I was so far gone with the acquisition and building the platform, building the company, getting approval, getting the loan that my husband said, okay.
Now, what were you thinking at the time that when you put your entire family savings into this business? Was it exhilarating? Was it scary? How are you feeling?
So I wasn't scared, but my husband was another story. So were my kids, since my daughter was getting ready to go to college. And so it was, my husband actually was retired, but he returned to work.
That's an amazing transition for a family.
Yes, my kids work for their college tuition.
Tell us a little bit about what is CXA Group? What is it about?
CXA is all about helping companies improve their employee health to cut their healthcare costs. Those were the issues that they were complaining about. Also, allowing each employee to tailor to their own life stage and their health needs.
Now, when you started CXA, you actually purchased an existing insurance company and you combined that with tech. Is that correct?
Yes, I purchased an insurance broker.
I'm fascinated by that because here you acquired a company, you deliberately bought a company that's had all the problems that you were experiencing before. So
Yes.
quite traditional, quite conservative.
Yes.
And you made it into a high-tech company.
Exactly.
How did you do that?
Well, in order to compete in the industry, you have to have a brokerage license because the HR just pays for insurance and then they get the platform. So I needed the brokerage platform and there were no more licenses at the time. So the only way you can get into the industry is if you buy a license. My mistake was that I bought the largest one, not the smallest one.
So if you had to do it over again, would you buy a smaller one?
Yes, yes.
And why was that a mistake?
There are cultural issues when you combine a mom and pop SME with a tech startup because the two cultures are polar opposites.
How did you fuse a shared culture?
We had to. So we moved in together and we actually did everything possible to get the teams to relate and trust each other and work together. So we worked on joint projects, we had happy hours, we had everyone over at my house for Halloween or Easter egg hunts. We actually did everything possible to build teams and to build trust.
I hear trust talked about a lot in organizations. So as a leader, what do you think was most important to build trust for you?
For me, is actually getting to know people and having a shared vision of the future. So making sure everyone in the firm has that, even if they're from the brokerage or from the tech side, was very important. So having shared goals and having shared projects to work towards those goals actually fused us together.
Did you have people that couldn't make that journey?
Yes, yes, yes. There are people who do refuse to change. And we were all about change and transforming for the future. So not everyone wanted to make that change.
How long was it before you started to get a sense that this was really going to be a thing?
It was actually within the first year, because within year one, we actually had a very large famous tech firm, a very large manufacturer, and a very large financial services firm all buy. So within year one, we actually got traction.
That's so exciting. One of the things that I love from our conversations is about how obsessed you are with the customer and about adding value to the customer and about looking outside and not inside. Share what you've learned in your own career that can help other leaders do the same.
So the reason these 3 firms bought, even though we were an unknown and I bought a mom and pop, was because I spent the first year with these 3 clients, actually understanding every single one of their pain points and showing them prototypes and gathering their feedback and improving our platform based on their feedback. So we actually co-created CXA. It wasn't our idea, which is what I used to do in my first 2 startups. It really was a co-creation of a product that they wanted.
I really love that because you're describing the role that you played as more like an anthropologist than a salesperson.
Yeah, I wasn't selling. I was actually trying to figure out what is the biggest pain, so how can we solve this pain?
And that's such a great mindset because it's so common for people to have something they want to convince others of. And what I'm hearing you describing is really starting from the outside and using that to then shape your strategy.
Exactly. It's what I learned from my startup worlds, that it's really about a problem that others have that you can figure out how to solve together.
Rosaline, we work with so many organizations today that are both afraid of disruption and are also trying to disrupt themselves. What can they learn from you as a leader and from your startup experience that can help them understand and manage disruption?
So we are just about to disrupt ourselves. Now, instead of just using our brokerage, firms are going to use our technology to white label our technology for all of their corporate clients. So that will probably intersect with my base, but it is okay because for each bank I get 350,000 corporate customers. But of course, it'll intersect with my business. It makes much more sense for me to scale this way.
So I'm hearing you say 2 things that I think are important for leaders to hear. One is to go on a journey from just meeting the needs of a customer to actually intervening with an ecosystem.
Exactly.
And the other thing that I'm hearing you saying is about being willing to behave in a way that enables you to scale. And that may not be the old way. It may be a new way.
It is. The only way a tech company works is if you break the link between time and money. So the only way to break that is if you have repeatable processes that can be used across hundreds of thousands of corporate customers and millions of users. So it's really figuring out what's repeatable, what can solve all their issues, even though they're very difficult issues. So how can you be so compelling? And that's what we had to figure out. How can we take 25% off the cost of healthcare for all of these different firms? Once you have that, and you can tailor to the needs of each firm, each employee, then you figured out a business model.
I want to just ask you for a moment about health.
Yes.
Because I know that you have a lot of passion around the future of health and how it's changing.
Sure.
It seems that the future of health is important to all of us. People are getting older faster, costs are rising. There's so many stakeholders. They have just intractable differences. How do you see your business and others like your business helping solve these problems for the world?
We think of health as the whole continuum. So if you think of a workplace, each employee are in different stages of their health. So some may just have symptoms, some may be getting sick, some may just discover, and we hope we can help them discover that they have a disease, a chronic disease, so we do the early detection. Or some people may be wanting to get ultra healthy, physically, mentally, spiritually. So we build an ecosystem that's the entire spectrum. That way, each person can tailor to where they are. And so we don't think of it like insurance does, only if you need treatment, only if something bad happens. We think it's the whole continuum. So how do you build an ecosystem so wherever you are in your health journey, we can be there to help you?
So it sounds like you have this unique combination of a focus on the individual, a focus on health, and an insight about how you build an ecosystem that can help promote individual health.
Exactly. Our unique advantage is figuring out how do you free up existing money to do all of this. money that companies are spending already. And then how do we take out all of the middlemen in the whole health ecosystem to actually reduce their cost of treatment, because there's so many layers.
I'm a little bit curious that how do people respond to what you're saying? Because what you're describing could be very threatening to many parties.
Yes. So I actually do get threatened a lot by the middlemen since I am removing them.
And how do you handle that? How do you manage that as a person?
It's okay. Words can't hurt me. So
thick skins can be helpful.
Exactly.
Live without fear.
When I grew up in Los Angeles, they used to beat me up. So it's like, okay, this is not going to hurt me. You're not going to disfigure me or maim me, right? These are just words.
Do you think that you would have had this passion had you not had the personal experience as a mother of a child that had physical issues?
I don't know. I don't know what drives a person to do what they do. It's probably a cumulative effect of growing up tough, running, hating bullies, being very different, and also having my daughter go through what she went through and really trying to figure out the diagnosis, right? You have to see so many people just to figure it out.
Coming up in the next segment.
I actually think organizations know what their problems are. It's actually speaking up.
You're listening to Growth Leaders, a podcast with Alison Eyring.
Your story is a wonderful example of how everything you've been through in your life has come together in this moment when you've started and are leading this business that's bringing about pretty exciting transformation within its ecosystem. I'm fascinated by the fact that along the way, you tried to get existing companies to take actions that would have been more risky, that would have been actually could have led to them being very profitable or to having achieved growth objectives that they would want. Many people that are going to listen to your story are in those kind of companies. What advice can you give them about how they can bring about transformation, change, and growth within their own organization?
I actually think organizations know what their problems are. It's actually speaking up and being bold enough to actually lead the charge for change. So when you're at the ground level working with clients, you hear their complaints a lot. So you actually know how to solve it. So it's really mobilizing and figuring out, now if there's a way we can use technology, can we solve this issue? But the thing about health is it touches everybody, the insurance companies, the TPAs, the clinics, the hospitals, the pharmacies, the labs, the chronic disease management, the gyms, the mindful. It's just so extensive, the diabetes. So to fix health, you actually need all the players involved. So it's a more complex issue, but it really is an ecosystem play.
What about for companies that are not in the healthcare or health sector? What advice would you give those leaders?
I actually would say, look external, not internal. Figure out what are the biggest problems in your industry that your clients are dealing with. And if you focus there, the solutions are there.
You have just shown a track record of taking risks, and clearly you've had issues in your own personal life that have given you courage. What's your word of advice to the person who says, well, I'm just not senior enough, or my voice isn't big enough, or doesn't feel courageous enough, but feels passionate and cares and wants to bring about change?
So you can always talk to your boss or your boss's boss or others around you. It took me many, many decades before becoming senior. So even when I was in my 20s, I was already doing this. I think we all have a place to play. So do we stand passively by and just clock time at work? Or can we actually be the agents of change? So it's really a mental shift. Right? Are you here just to pass time, or are you here to make a difference? So speaking up is not that bad. What's the worst that can happen?
I've loved talking to you, Rosaline. My key takeaways listening to you are, one, have courage and learn from your life how to have more of it. I've learned from you that every opportunity, every job we have, every place we are can give us opportunities to learn if we just take them. I really hear you talking so much about think outside in thinking. And as a scientist, I love that because all the research shows that that way of thinking, outside in, letting the customer drive transformation and change and prioritization is a key driver of growth. And I hear that from you over and over. And I think another big takeaway is solve the problems that matter most to your customers. Understand what causes them pain and solve those problems. And don't just think about that one customer, but think about the whole ecosystem.
Exactly.
Any last word of advice that you'd like to share?
Alison, you're right. It's all about rising to the occasion in every job you have. So how do you actually look at what are the things that matter the most, right? And focus on those. Once you focus on the big strategic questions, it's really just a puzzle that you're solving, right? You can break it down piece by piece. It took me 6 years to get to where I wanted to start, which was to have others white label us. But sometimes you just have to build up credibility. But breaking down the things that matter the most will get you the answers you need.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Rosaline.
Sure thing.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to Growth Leaders wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a comment and a rating. We'd love to hear what you think. If you have questions about growth or growth leadership, please email us at growthleaders@organizationsolutions.com. Growth Leaders is produced by Organization Solutions in partnership with MediaCorp. Many thanks to Dee Kirk, Sean Young, Barry Toe, Keith Tan,